And it's happened. It is the end of this copybook. I don't know what you'd call it, notebook. It's the end, literally the last two papers. But I did promise you an Easter egg. So let me read it for you and then show it to you. Hi, smiley face. Quotes, I have a deeply hidden and inarticulate desire for something beyond the daily life. Virginia Woolf. So a friend of mine wrote this to me, I think 4 months ago, 5 months ago. And probably when I first cracked open this book. And she did very much inspire me to kind of like think differently about a whole lot of stuff. And the beauty of this now, like when I reached the end, Virginia Woolf, I should have Googled that woman, but I just trusted this friend of mine. So a deeply hidden and inarticulate desire for something beyond the daily life. Like I don't know what it is. There's something more that I kind of want. And it's funky because that's kind of like all of us, right? Some would look at it as I mean, I think most of us kind of look at it as like, I don't know why I'm frustrated. But to some, we're kind of like, there's something more that I'm excited to see or something like this. Anyways, much thanks for this Easter egg and the cuteness behind it. But today's video is 3 kinds of thinking: words, images, feelings. That's a TED Talk, by the way. Communicating with others and understanding how to communicate with yourself and articulating on all 3 levels. All right, so my take, it's TED Talk again. And a woman is describing how to better communicate with people because some people are more emotionally oriented, some people are more visually oriented. And the visually oriented are basically, she describes them as like the majority of the people. It's because like it's easier for them to see kind of stuff and to kind of like build an image of things in their head. There are people that are kind of like able to articulate through words. So you can actually communicate with them using technical, probably jargon or something like this. And there's the feelings ones. The feelings ones are I don't think they're few, man. But I don't think they're. I think the ability to understand those personal feelings, or at the very least to express our personal feelings when engaging with people that are more emotionally driven, it's kind of like the whole, because like when you're painting a picture, they have to see the picture, and when they see the picture, they relate to it, so it becomes emotional. But the words you use, like I want to see us succeeding, versus I want to feel the end of this or the success of it, versus I want us to kind of like explore what success would look like when it comes to this. Like each one kind of like says the same thing differently. And for people, they resonate with like one of them, or some people kind of would understand you regardless because they're on point or just professional or aware enough for them to realize what you're trying to say without the necessity for that kind of like personal attachment to it. Well, on the fun times, by the way, super fun way the cat is sleeping on my leg, the kitten. So let's talk about it. Words. Describing things through words versus describing things through images versus describing things through feelings. I think human beings communicate on all these levels. And here, understanding how to communicate with yourself is basically what I pointed at. Because I am a firm believer that if you understand yourself, then ultimately you will always be able to, you will always be expressing yourself a certain kind of way. You will always be able to allow others to see what you're trying to say, what you're trying to express. And the better you communicate with yourself, the better you're able to kind of like express intentionally based on the topic that you're saying. So then that's the articulation. And again, articulating expression is not articulating your words, it's not articulating the images, it's not articulating the feeling, because the expression is the combination of all of them, isn't it? A true expression of art is not just the picture or the music, it's basically the story that comes with all emotions that kind of like take you from A to Z and kind of like give you that closure, that that finalize the expression. David Lynch, I love that guy. He once said, "I could look at my movie and I know it's not perfect, but I know but I can tell it's complete. And if it's complete, it's finished. That means it's time for me to do something else." And I think that's for him. Movies are expression. Music is expression. Work is expression, right? Like funny. I was having a conversation the other day with a friend of mine, and she wanted to write a document for her management to explain some kind of stuff, and she's using a lot of visuals because it's much easier. Or for me, I was like, what would you write about what you're trying to say? How would you write it? And then she kind of like stopped and looked at me weirdly. It's like, why does it matter? And ultimately, because her work is to be expressed through her presentation. And for me, I felt there's a key missing factor that she herself is not really putting. She's not putting herself in that space. And so I'm thinking of a lot of stuff, but I'm not going to go there. So to communicate with yourself in order to articulate on all three levels, it's like a bartending thing. I used to be a bartender, by the way. And it's the funny thing, it's like the same gin tonic as a gin tonic. It's simple, like gin and tonic, right? But the same gin tonic is so simple to do that it tastes so much different based on the bartenders that do it. Because it's so simple, it really allows every bartender to express exactly the type of bartender they are. It's their, it's themselves, right? It's who they are is expressed through that drink. And I wrote a note about it yesterday because it's kind of like the iceberg effect, because you see the iceberg, but there's a lot that makes it actually like right. There's a lot in the bottom, but you only see the top. And so all that in the bottom is what allows that top to be expressed that way. And the communication with yourself in order to be able to articulate on all three levels, I think, is really in how you paint a picture with words, how you use the actual picture in order to like express feelings, and how you use these feelings to come up with words to kind of like, they're all kind of like, it's like a triangle. It's the recycling triangle that we see. Organic waste, recycling plant, compost, and then greens again, and then basically like it goes all over again. And so, how do we understand the communication with ourselves? And do we ever get to understand how we're communicating with ourselves, or do we get to understand what we're communicating, or do we just kind of like create this feedback loop where the first thing we're doing is we're assessing what we're doing, and then basically we're trying to kind of like, I wrote about it one time. There's a full article that I actually posted once about how to think. And there's first the assessment, and then there's the articulation, and then there's the approach. You think of something, and then basically you explore it. And then after you explore it, you explain what you explored, but you just literally tell the story after you went through the exploration. And when you do that, something else pops up. So the same thing pops up again, and you kind of like go through the circle. So you communicate with yourself, articulating on all three levels, because you have to be able to connect them in a way that fulfills that expression in you. You have to be able to engage with every single one of this, of like whether it comes to like you communicating through words, you communicating through the images, and you communicating through the feelings. And since they actually feed each other, then ultimately all you have to do is kind of like watch your expression to see if it's biased towards one thing or another. Like if I'm trying to explain something and I'm using a lot of words, that means I'm kind of like overkilling. It's overkill because the image in my head is not as clear as I would want it to be. And if I'm using way too many images, it feels like that means I'm trying to visualize it, but I don't really have like the emotional relationship to it. And if I'm using a lot of feelings, that probably means I'm not really able to express it in words or in the image, right? Any way you look at it, there's this kind of like symbiotic relationship between these three that kind of has to be balanced for your expression to be complete. And I think that balance is our awareness and where our consciousness kind of like dives into the whole like, what am I trying to get out of me? This. And then how I'm trying to get out of me is basically is my own thing, whether it's a piece of art, whether it's a piece of music, whether it's like a paper giving feedback on some project I have, whether it is just a lecture I'm doing or a conversation I'm having or an opinion I have. All of them are expressing truly who I am. But if I don't really understand what I'm trying to express, then it expresses who I am in an unbalanced way, which kind of like falls short in the communication aspect when others get to understand it. And I think that's the video. What? Okay.